When Triumph arrived in Philippine shores a couple of years ago, it coincided with the release of the Trident. Back then, I said that the Trident was a very important bike for the British brand. And the reason why I said that is because Triumph was able to infiltrate the Philippine market and the segment as well that was dominated by the Japanese Big Four. And the Trident sold like hotcakes. In fact, it became the gateway bike for many. Now, a year after that, they came out with the Tiger 660. And now, this, the Daytona 660. So let's find out a little bit more about it in this episode of Beyond the Ride. Powering the bike is a 660cc liquid-cooled inline 3-cylinder 12-valve dual overhead cam engine that punches out 94 horsepower at 11,250 RPM and 69 Nm of torque at 8,250 RPM. For the front suspension, you get a Showa 41mm upside-down separate function fork with 110mm wheel travel. For the rear, you get a Showa monoshock with preload adjustment and 130mm wheel travel. Stopping power up front, you get twin 310mm floating discs, 4-piston calipers, of course with ABS. And for the rear, you get a single 220mm fixed disc, single piston sliding caliper, also with ABS. For the wheels, you get cast aluminum alloy, 5 spokes. And for the tires, they're both 17s. Up front, you get 120/70, and for the rear, you get 180/55. And these are the new Michelin sport tires. You do get LEDs all around, which is a nice touch. Not all middleweight bikes have LEDs all around. You also get a nice display right here with all the information that you need, and you can control it via the buttons right here on the side. And it is pretty intuitive. I mean, it's nothing too complicated. It's fairly basic, which is my preference actually for bikes like this. The wet weight of the bike is 201 kilograms, which seems a little bit like it's on the heavier side as compared to what I expected it to be, but it's still not so bad. When you're moving it around in the city or moving it around in the parking area, it's actually pretty light. Or maybe I'm just used to adventure bikes. Now, the fuel tank capacity is 14 liters, which is just about average for a bike like this. And the fuel consumption, you get about 24 kilometers per liter, about 22 to 24 kilometers per liter, which is about average for a bike like this. Now, something that I appreciate about Triumph is very similar to that of the Trident, the service intervals. 16,000 kilometers before you have to bring it in for a PMS and so on and so forth. So you get to save a little bit on that side. The seat height of the bike is a fairly Pinoy-friendly 810 millimeters. I'm 5'6" with a 764 millimeter inseam. And that is the situation. Not too bad. So let's do a quick sound test, shall we? The OG Daytona dates back to the 1990s as, well, it started out as a sports tourer, but eventually it evolved to become the sports bike of Triumph. It was technically their superbike, known for its agility, handling, and performance. It was aggressive, something that you kind of need to tame. Today's Daytona is not that. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because this is really more rideable in real-world conditions. Yes, it's more aggressive and committed compared to the Trident, obviously, but it's still friendly enough and comfortable enough to be used as a daily motorcycle. The riding position is kind of in the middle of a Yamaha R7 and a Ninja 650. And I've been using this bike for the past few weeks for coffee and breakfast rides and riding around the city, and I don't really have any real complaints about the bike. And to think that it was just activated, so it hasn't really been broken into yet. Now it does feel a little bit more refined than the R7 and the Ninja, and it's kind of closer, in my opinion at least, to the Aprilia RS 660, which I actually really enjoyed. The funny thing about the bike is that you feel like you're going faster than you really are. There are times that when I was on the highway, I thought I was going at a certain speed. I looked down at the speedometer, I was like, oh, that's nowhere near where I thought I was going. So in a sense, it's kind of like those little sports cars, kind of like, let's say, a Miata or a BMW Z3. They look the part, they're just not that fast. But when you're driving those cars, you get the sensation that you're going really, really fast, but the truth is you're really not. And honestly, that could be that's not a bad thing at all, because it still gives you the sensation of a sports car. The same way that this still gives you the sensation of a sport bike. The Daytona of the past, those are the super sport bikes of Triumph. And that's really what people fell in love with. That's the Daytona that they've come to know through the years. And this, it's still a sport bike, don't get me wrong. By any, it is. But it's more road, more meant for the road than it is for the track. And it's also meant to be a little bit more comfortable and relaxed than super sport bikes are supposed to be. So you take away the super and you just leave it as a sport bike, and this is very capable, and absolutely you can use this on the daily. Now the suspension of the bike is pretty comfortable, and you can tell it's really meant for the road. I mean, just by sitting on the bike and moving a little bit, you can tell that it's too soft to be something of a ultimate, something for the track and something to be for real performance. It's really meant to be more comfortable, right? I mean, that's where this bike falls. It's not something that is a purpose-built machine like some of the other super sport bikes out there. This is really something that Triumph decided, you know what? We want a broader market. We're going to go after that. We're not going to go specific, super sport bike for the track. This is really meant for a broader audience. Like if somebody were to be choosing between this and the Trident, personally, I would choose a Trident. But for some people, they may want a bike that looks a little bit more aggressive, look a little bit more, well, to a certain extent, younger, to be a little bit more sport. And that's where this falls. And you can't go wrong between the two, to be honest. But personally, my personal preference, because I like neo retros, would be with the Trident. Don't get me wrong, you can still take this bike and enjoy track days. You still will enjoy it. You just can't really, it's not meant for hardcore track riding, put it that way. You can enjoy it, you can take it on a weekend, go to the track, enjoy the bike, but it's not something, like there are other bikes in the middleweight category that are super sport bikes that would probably be more, that you can really push more on the track and really, really maximize that. This is not one of those. This is something that it's really more of a road machine than anything else. The ergonomics of the bike is, it is committed. It is, don't get me wrong. I mean, you are leaning forward. The clip-ons, even though they are a little bit raised, you still feel a little bit of that pressure on your wrists when you're riding this bike for a long time. The foot pegs are rear set. So it's definitely not super relaxed, but it's not super ultra committed either. It's actually, it's pleasant. It's not a bad daily position to be in, to be honest. It's something, again, it's not my preference, but there's going to be people out there that want this look, and I'm not going to argue with them. Now, one thing it's definitely missing is a quick shifter. Now, yes, you can add that on, but it's something that I wish that they just included with this bike already, instead of you having to pay an extra amount when you get it from the showroom. It needs it. In my opinion, it really does need it. It's something that I think bikes of this nature, of any sport bike, actually, in my opinion, every bike out there should have a quick shifter, and especially a bike like this. The bike is very agile, it's very nimble, you can lean the bike fairly easily, and that's the nature of sport bikes. That's why this exists, so that you can do those things and be comfortable and be confident with it as well. And I didn't get to take this on some hardcore twisty trails. I really wanted to try this bike out, or twisties rather, but I really wanted to try this bike out on how it performs with, you know, normal daily riding. So city use, normal easy breakfast rides, coffee rides, and that's it. And that I just wanted to see if, you know, somebody who is not a sport bike rider, who doesn't prefer to be on a sport bike, could still be comfortable enough with this bike using it on the daily for the past couple of weeks. And honestly, it worked fairly well. So yes, the bike is a Triumph. Yes, it is a UK brand, but when you're riding it, it kind of feels Japanese. That's not a bad thing. I do love Japanese bikes, but it's kind of strange that, you know, like a UK brand would go for that, because, or in a way, I guess that's really what they were after, because they know that the Japanese Big Four owns that category. I guess that's why they did it. But I think if they just added a little bit of UK character to it, that would differentiate it a whole lot more than the other bikes in with the Japanese Big Four in its competition. And speaking of, you know, feeling like a Japanese bike, the other thing that is very Japanese about it is also its price. So does the bike do Daytonas of yore justice? Well, some people have said no, but I'm not going to hate on it. Think about it. The reason why the Trident did so well is because that bike is, you know, you can use that for the daily. It's great for entry-level riders, or if you have a big adventure bike, you can use the Trident as your city bike. And Triumph saw that and said to themselves, you know what, maybe we can duplicate that with a sport bike. And that's why they came up with this. And I think it's actually pretty good. If you think about, you know, the people out there who would prefer sport bikes over a Neo Retro, this is actually a very good choice. And with a starting price tag of 549,000 Philippine pesos, it is a decent deal. For more information about this bike and MCs out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. I'm Gene Rufino. Thanks for watching Beyond the Ride.